I could hear them laughing from the driveway. I sat in my car, engine off, watching the golden light spill from my mother's windows. Shadows moved across the curtains. My sisters dancing probably. The annual Stewart family celebration was in full swing, and I was late. Again. My fingers tightened around the small gift box on my lap. Inside was a vintage brooch I'd spent 3 months tracking down, a replica of one my grandmother had owned. The one my mother had always said reminded her of happier times. I didn't want to go in. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to start the car and drive away. But I was 34 years old, too old to still be seeking maternal approval, like some desperate teenager. Just get it over with, Trisha, I muttered to myself, shoving the car door open. The blast of music hit me as soon as I opened the front door. No one noticed me slip inside. I stood in the entryway, watching them, my family, yet not quite mine. Natalia was at the center of it all, of course. My younger sister twirled in a crimson dress, her laugh musical, as she accepted a glass of champagne from Jesse, our stepfather. His face glowed with pride. Michelle and Michaela flanked them, all perfect teeth and synchronized movements, like they'd rehearsed being a family. My mother, Denise, sat in her favorite armchair, surveying her kingdom. Even at 55, she commanded the room. Her gaze drifted over to me, and for a split second, I thought I saw something like disappointment flash across her face before she composed herself. Trisha, you made it. Her voice carried across the room, silencing conversations. Everyone turned to look at me. I forced a smile, suddenly aware of my sensible black pants and department store blouse. Next to Natalia's designer dress, I might as well have been wearing a trash bag. Sorry I'm late. Work ran long. The lie slipped out easily. I'd actually spent 40 minutes in my car around the corner, trying to talk myself into coming. Always working, my mother said, with a tight smile. Come, we were just about to do gifts. I moved through the room, accepting awkward side hugs and cheek kisses. Simon, my best friend since college, gave me a genuine smile from the corner where he nursed a whiskey. Thank God I'd convinced him to come. I needed at least one person who was actually on my side. Nice of you to grace us with your presence, Natalia said, her words friendly, but her eyes cold. Mom was starting to worry. Was she? I asked, knowing full well my mother hadn't texted or called. Jesse clapped his hands. Present time, ladies. Denise has something special for each of you. We gathered around my mother's chair like supplicants before a queen. One by one, my sisters received their envelopes. Each contained the same thing: confirmation that they were beneficiaries of our mother's substantial estate, equal shares to be inherited upon her death. A morbid tradition she'd started after her cancer scare 3 years ago. So you never forget how much I love you, she always said, as if money and love were interchangeable. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, first offering my gift. I found it in an antique shop in Portland, I said, as she unwrapped the brooch. She glanced at it. How thoughtful. The brooch disappeared into her pocket without a second look. Then she handed me my envelope. It felt lighter than the others. I opened it slowly, aware of everyone watching. Inside wasn't the usual legal document, but a handwritten letter. My eyes scanned the first line, and my stomach dropped. Dearest Trisha, I've made the difficult decision to remove you from my will. The room kept moving around me, but I was suddenly underwater, sounds muffled, vision blurring at the edges. I forced myself to keep reading. Your sisters have families to consider, futures to build. You've always been so independent, so capable of taking care of yourself. I know you'll understand this is for the best. I looked up. My mother was watching me, her expression unreadable. Did the others know? The way Natalia smirked suggested she did. Everything okay? Simon asked from beside me, his voice low. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. Perfect, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Just perfect. Later, as everyone moved to the dining room, my mother caught my arm. You understand, don't you? She whispered. You've never really been part of this family in the same way. Not since you were born. The words hit like a physical blow. What does that mean? She patted my hand. Let's not make a scene. This is a celebration. I watched her walk away, joining the others at the table, where they clinked glasses and laughed. 34 years of trying to belong, of making myself smaller, of accepting scraps of affection, all for nothing. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The hurt crystallized into something sharper, more dangerous. If I wasn't family enough to inherit, I wasn't family enough to keep her secrets either. I slipped the letter into my purse and pulled out my phone. Opening the voice recorder app, my mother had no idea what she'd just started. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The letter sat on my nightstand, like a bomb waiting to detonate. At 4 a.m., I gave up trying, made coffee, and watched the sunrise from my apartment window. By 8 a.m., I was sitting at my mother's breakfast table, forcing myself to smile as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't spent the night replaying every moment of my life, searching for the exact point where I became disposable. More coffee, Trisha? Jessie asked, the newspaper creating a barrier between us. Please. I held out my cup, my phone recording in my pocket. Every word, every interaction. I'd capture it all now. My mother breezed in, immaculate in her silk robe. You're here early, she said, surprise evident in her voice. I thought you'd have left already. Wanted to spend more time with everyone, I lied. Since I'm not around much. Natalia snorted into her orange juice. That's an understatement. You missed Mom's birthday last month. I was in Seattle for work, I said, the familiar defensiveness rising. Some of us don't have trust funds to fall back on. Girls, my mother warned, though her eyes lingered on me with disapproval. Michelle and Michaela joined us, both looking fresh despite last night's celebration. Michelle immediately went to our mother, kissing her cheek. Morning, Mom. I made your favorite smoothie. You're an angel, my mother said, accepting it with a smile I'd never received. I watched them, these perfect daughters who knew exactly how to please her. What had I missed? What secret language of maternal love had I failed to learn? I thought we could all go shopping today, Natalia suggested. There's a new boutique downtown I've been dying to check out. Wonderful idea, my mother agreed. Trisha, will you join us? The invitation surprised me. Sure, yes. Excellent. She sipped her smoothie. Though you might want to change first. Something a bit more presentable. I looked down at my perfectly normal outfit and bit back a retort. Of course. After breakfast, I excused myself for a walk, needing air that wasn't perfumed with my mother's expectations. The neighborhood was quiet, suburban perfection stretching in every direction. I'd grown up here but never felt I belonged. My phone buzzed. Simon, how are you holding up? He asked when I answered. I'm fine. Bullshit. I saw your face when you read that letter. I sighed, finding a bench beneath an oak tree. She cut me out completely, Simon, like I'm nothing. You're not nothing. You're the most successful one of the bunch. You built your career without their help. That's exactly her justification. I'm independent. Code for not our problem. What are you going to do? I watched a leaf spiral down from the tree. I'm going to make her admit the truth, all of it. I've started recording everything. Trisha, don't try to talk me out of it. I wasn't going to. His voice softened. I was going to say, be careful, and maybe check the laws about recording people without consent. I almost smiled. Already did. One-party consent state. As long as I'm part of the conversation, it's legal. Of course you checked. He paused. What truth are you hoping to get? I don't know exactly, but there's something. Last night she said, I've never really been part of this family, not since you were born. What does that even mean? You think there's more to the story. I know there is, and I'm going to find out what. I hung up and headed back, taking a shortcut through the garden path that connected to the rear of my mother's property. As I approached, I heard voices from the gazebo, Natalia and my mother. I slowed, stepping carefully to avoid the gravel path. My phone was already recording. Can't believe you actually did it, Natalia was saying. I thought you'd chicken out. I gave her fair warning, my mother replied. She's made her choices. Still, cutting her out completely is cold, even for you. It's necessary. After what Jessie found out about her meetings with the lawyer, we can't risk it. My heart stuttered. What meetings? I hadn't spoken to any lawyer. What if she fights it? Natalia asked. She won't. Trisha has always been desperate for approval. She'll accept this like she's accepted everything else. Quietly, with that martyred look she's perfected. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. Besides, my mother continued, she has no idea about the real estate holdings or the offshore accounts. As far as she knows, the will only covers the house and basic investments. And you're sure Jessie can keep it that way? If she ever found out how much is really at stake, she won't. Jessie has made sure of it. The paperwork is ironclad, and the only copy of the full portfolio is in the safe. She'll never know what she's missing. I backed away slowly, mind racing. There was more money, much more, and they were hiding it. But why cut me out? What had I supposedly done? As I turned to leave, my foot caught on a garden hose. The resulting clatter wasn't loud, but in the quiet morning, it might as well have been a gunshot. What was that? My mother's voice sharpened. I didn't wait to find out. I ran, not caring about the noise now, heart pounding in my chest. I made it to the side gate and slipped through, pressing my back against the fence. They weren't just excluding me, they were actively conspiring against me. And now I had proof. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and desperation. I'd gotten the call 3 hours after fleeing the garden. My mother had collapsed during their shopping trip. Not serious, Natalia had assured me. Just low blood pressure, but they were keeping her overnight for observation. I clutched my purse, feeling the weight of my phone inside. The recording from this morning burned in my pocket like contraband. My mother's room was at the end of the hall. Through the half-open door, I could see her lying in bed, eyes closed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Jessie sat beside her, his hand covering hers. The perfect concerned husband. I hesitated in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. What was I doing? Was I really going to confront my dying mother? She wasn't dying, I reminded myself. Low blood pressure, and she'd been perfectly fine plotting against me this morning. Jessie looked up, his expression hardening when he saw me. Trisha, you came. Of course I came. I stepped into the room, setting my purse on the visitor's chair. How is she? Resting. Doctor says it's nothing serious, but at her age, they want to monitor her. At 55, my mother was hardly ancient, but I nodded anyway. I need coffee, Jessie said abruptly. Stay with her. I nodded again, watching him leave. As soon as the door closed behind him, I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. My mother's eyes fluttered open. Trisha, I'm here. I moved closer, sitting in the chair Jessie had vacated. How are you feeling? Tired. She reached for the water cup on her tray. I helped her take a sip. Where are the girls? The girls. Never your sisters. Always separate. Natalia said they went to get food. I pressed record on my phone, setting it on the bed beside her hand. Mom, I need to ask you something. She sighed. If this is about the will, it's not just about the will, it's about why. Why have you always treated me differently? Her eyes, so like mine, studied my face. You've always been different, Trisha, from the moment you were born. What does that mean? You said the same thing last night. She was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. Then, you were supposed to be a boy. I blinked. What? We had the tests. They said you were a boy. We painted the nursery blue. Bought little sailor outfits. A faint smile touched her lips. Your father was so excited. He'd always wanted a son to carry on the family name. So, you've resented me for 34 years because I was born female. Don't be dramatic. It wasn't just that. She shifted in the bed. You were difficult from the start. Colicky. Wouldn't sleep. Your father started staying at work later and later to avoid the crying. I was a baby, I said, incredulous. Then you grew into a stubborn child, always questioning, never accepting. The others were easier. The others came after Dad left. Her face hardened. Yes, after he left me with a difficult child and mountains of debt. I felt like I'd been slapped. You blame me for him leaving. I'm just stating facts. She reached for her water, again. You asked why I've treated you differently. There's your answer. I stared at her. This woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and apparently resented me every step of the way. That's not an answer, that's an excuse. Believe what you want. You always do. My phone buzzed with a text, drawing her attention to it. Her eyes narrowed. Are you recording this? I didn't answer. She grabbed for my phone, but I was faster. You are. You're recording me? In a hospital bed? I want the truth, Mom, about everything. The offshore accounts, the real estate holdings. Her face went white. What are you talking about? I heard you and Natalia this morning. I know there's more money than you've admitted to. I know Jesse is helping you hide it. You were spying on me. Her voice rose. In my own home? I was walking in the garden and heard you plotting against me. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? My mother composed herself instantly. Fine, thank you. My daughter was just leaving. I'm not. Yes, you are. Her voice was ice. And don't come back until you're ready to apologize. The nurse gave me a pointed look. I grabbed my purse, hands shaking with anger and something else. Hurt, raw, and familiar. In the hallway, I checked my phone. The recording had saved, but when I played it back, there was nothing but static and the occasional unintelligible murmur. The hospital equipment must have interfered with the audio. I leaned against the wall, fighting tears of frustration. All that confrontation for nothing. Trisha, I looked up to see Michaela, my youngest sister, approaching with a paper bag. Are you okay? Fine, I said automatically, wiping my eyes. You don't look fine. She hesitated, then held out the bag. I got an extra sandwich, turkey and avocado. The simple kindness nearly undid me. Of all my sisters, Michaela had always been the least caught up in the family politics. Thanks, I said, taking it. She glanced toward our mother's room. She's not really sick, is she? What do you mean? Michaela lowered her voice. I overheard Natalia on the phone with Jesse before we came. Something about creating a controlled environment to talk to Mom about the changes. Changes? To the will, I think? She shrugged. I don't know the details. No one tells me anything important. I knew that feeling all too well. Michaela, I said carefully, what would you say if I told you Mom and Jesse are hiding assets, that there's more money than anyone knows about? Her eyes widened. I'd say, that explains a lot. Like why Natalia suddenly quit her job last year but still bought that condo downtown. I stared at her, seeing my sister, really seeing her, for the first time in years. She wasn't just the baby of the family. She was observant, and possibly an ally. We should talk, I said. Not here. She nodded, understanding immediately. Coffee shop on Maple, tomorrow at 10? I'll be there. As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. If they were hiding money, who else were they hurting? What else were they hiding? I needed answers, and I needed a better plan. The coffee shop on Maple was busy for a Tuesday morning. I arrived 15 minutes early, claimed a corner table, and ordered a latte I didn't touch. My stomach was too knotted to handle caffeine. I'd spent the night researching recording devices. My phone wasn't cutting it. Too obvious, too unreliable. I needed something better. Michaela arrived at 10:05, windblown and apologetic. Sorry I'm late. Natalia kept calling, wanting updates on Mom. Is she still in the hospital? No, they released her last night. She's home resting. Michaela shrugged off her jacket, or pretending to rest while holding court from her bedroom. I smiled despite myself. Michaela had always seen through our mother's dramatics. So, she said, after ordering her own drink, tell me what's going on. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how crazy it all sounded. I think Mom, Jesse, and Natalia are hiding significant assets, and I think they're cutting me out of the will to keep me from finding out. Michaela didn't look surprised. What kind of assets? real estate holdings, offshore accounts. I don't know the details yet. And you know this how? I overheard Mom and Natalia talking. I didn't mention the recording. Not yet. They specifically mentioned keeping me in the dark about how much money is really at stake. Michaela stirred her coffee thoughtfully. That tracks with some weird stuff I've noticed. Last month, Jesse had me sign some papers for a family investment. When I asked questions, he got super defensive. What kind of papers? Something about a property transfer. He said it was just moving things around for tax purposes. She frowned. I should have read it more carefully, but he was rushing me. My mind raced. Do you remember anything specific? Names, locations? There was something about Westlake Properties, and I think a date, June 15th. 3 days from now. Whatever they were planning was happening soon. Michaela, I need your help. I'm going to find out what they're hiding, but I can't do it alone. She bit her lip. What exactly are you asking me to do? Nothing illegal, I assured her. Just keep your eyes and ears open. Let me know if you see anything unusual. And maybe help me get access to Mom's house when no one's home. You want to search the house? Jesse mentioned a safe. If there's documentation of these hidden assets, that's where it would be. Michaela looked uncomfortable. Trisha, I don't know. They're using you, I said bluntly. Having you sign papers you don't understand. Don't you want to know what you're involved in? She stared into her coffee. What if we find something bad? Really bad. Then we deal with it, together. After a long moment, she nodded. Okay, I'll help, but we have to be careful. We will be. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you. As we finished our coffees, the door chimed. Simon walked in, spotted me, and headed over. Hey, he said, nodding to Michaela. Didn't expect to see you here. Just catching up with my sister, I said, giving him a look that said we'd talk later. Cool, mind if I join you? Michaela checked her watch. Actually, I need to go. Yoga class. She gathered her things, then hesitated. I'll text you about that thing we discussed. After she left, Simon took her seat. What thing? She's going to help me get into Mom's house. His eyebrows shot up. Breaking and entering now, are we? It's not breaking in if she lets me in. And what exactly are you hoping to find? Evidence, documents, anything that explains what they're hiding. I leaned forward. I need a recording device, something small, reliable. My phone isn't working. Simon's expression grew serious. Trisha, I'm worried about you. This is escalating fast. They're the ones escalating it. I'm just trying to protect myself. Are you? Because it sounds like you're on a revenge mission. I sat back, stung. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've spent your whole life trying to prove yourself to your mother. Now that she's officially rejected you, you're going to expose all her secrets. Sounds like revenge to me. It's not. I stopped, the denial dying on my lips. Was he right? Was this all just wounded pride and retaliation? Look, Simon said, gentler now. I'm on your side, always have been. But I need to know what we're really doing here. We. You think I'm letting you do this alone? He smiled, but his eyes remained concerned. I just want to make sure we're clear on the end game. I stared at my cold latte. What was my end game? To be acknowledged? To hurt my mother the way she'd hurt me? Or was there something more at stake? They're hiding money, I said finally. A lot of it, from the sound of it. And they're manipulating Michaela into signing documents she doesn't understand. I need to know what's really going on. Simon studied me. Okay, I believe you, but promise me something. What? If we find out there's nothing shady happening, if it turns out this is just normal rich people tax avoidance, you'll let it go. I wanted to argue, but he deserved honesty. I'll try. He nodded, accepting this. I have a friend who works in surveillance. I'll see what he can do about a recording device. Thank you. As we left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text from Michaela. Mom's having lunch with her friends tomorrow. House will be empty from 12:03. I'll leave the side door unlocked. I showed Simon the message. Well, he said, Looks like we have less than 24 hours to prepare for a heist. Not a heist, just reconnaissance. Whatever helps you sleep at night. He bumped my shoulder with his. For what it's worth, I think you're right about them hiding something. Your mother's always been too careful with her image. What do you mean? People that obsessed with appearances usually have something to hide. He gave me a significant look. The question is, are you prepared for what that might be? I wasn't sure I was. But I was even less prepared to walk away. Tomorrow at noon, I said, we find out what's in that safe. As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Whatever happened tomorrow, there would be no going back. I was crossing a line, becoming someone my mother had perhaps always feared I might be, someone who refused to stay in the shadows, who demanded truth regardless of the cost. Part of me wondered if that was exactly what she'd been trying to prevent all along. Jesse's study smelled of leather and secrets. Simon stood watch at the window, while I methodically searched the room. The weight of the tiny recording device he'd procured now pinned inside my bra. Getting into the house had been easy. Michaela had kept her word about the side door. Finding the safe was proving more challenging. Hurry up, Simon whispered. We've been here 20 minutes already. I ran my hands along the bookshelf, checking for hollow spaces. It has to be here somewhere. What if it's in their bedroom? I'd avoided the master bedroom, some last vestige of childhood respect holding me back. Let's check the study thoroughly first. The large painting behind Jesse's desk caught my attention. A generic landscape that seemed at odds with his usual taste for modern art. I lifted it carefully. Bingo. The wall safe was small but sophisticated, with a digital keypad rather than a traditional dial. Found it, I called softly. Simon joined me. Great. Now we just need the combination to a state-of-the-art security system. No problem. I ignored his sarcasm, studying the keypad. What would Jesse use? His birthday? Too obvious. My mother's? Maybe. I tried her birth date. 5/22/66. Access denied. Their anniversary. 11/14/10. Access denied. Try Natalia's birthday, Simon suggested. She's the favorite, right? I entered 070989. The light flashed green. The lock clicked. Unbelievable, I muttered, swinging the door open. Inside were several folders, a small jewelry box, and a USB drive. I grabbed the folders first, spreading them on Jesse's desk. The top one contained what looked like property deeds, 6 of them, for locations across 3 states, all listed under Westlake Properties LLC. This is it, I said, flipping through the pages. Properties worth millions, all hidden under this company name. Simon examined another folder. Trisha, look at this. He handed me a document titled Trust Agreement. I scanned it quickly, my blood running cold. They created a trust, I said, for Natalia, Michelle, and Michaela, but not me. Keep reading. I flipped to the next page and froze. There, in black and white, was the reason. In recognition that Tricia Stewart is not a biological descendant of Denise Meyer. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk. I'm not her daughter? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Simon took the paper, reading further. It says your biological mother was someone named Catherine Winters. She died in childbirth. That's impossible. She's lying. This is just another way to cut me out. But even as I said it, pieces clicked into place. The constant feeling of being an outsider. My mother's, no, Denise's, inability to bond with me. You were supposed to be a boy. Not just a boy, but someone else's boy. There's more, Simon said gently. Medical records. He handed me another folder. Inside were hospital documents from 34 years ago. A birth certificate with Catherine Winters, listed as mother. A death certificate dated the same day. And adoption papers, signed by my father and Denise. She adopted me when she married my dad. I whispered. I never knew. Trisha. All these years, she let me think. I couldn't finish the thought. Rage and grief collided inside me, stealing my breath. She let me believe I wasn't good enough, that I'd done something wrong, when really, she just couldn't love another woman's child. Simon put his arm around me. We should go, take pictures of everything, and put it back. I nodded numbly, reaching for my phone. As I photographed the documents, a new thought struck me. The trust, I said. How much is in it? Simon checked. According to this, just over 12 million. And they're using Westlake Properties to hide it from taxes. Not exactly. He frowned at the paperwork. It looks like they're transferring assets into this company. Then the company pays into the trust. It's all structured to minimize estate taxes. But what? Some of these transfers look questionable, like they're moving money from other sources. I thought of Jesse's investment firm, his wealthy clients. You think they're embezzling? I'm not an accountant, but these numbers don't add up cleanly. I took more photos, making sure to capture every page. We need to... The sound of a car door slamming cut me off. Simon rushed to the window. Shit, your mother's back. She's supposed to be at lunch until 3. I frantically gathered the papers, shoving them back into their folders. Well, she's here now, with Jesse. I replaced everything in the safe, exactly as I'd found it, closed it, and hung the painting. We need to get out. Too late. They're coming in the front door. I heard my mother's voice in the foyer, then Jesse's response. They were heading toward the study. The closet, I hissed, pulling Simon toward the walk-in storage closet at the back of the room. We barely made it inside, closing the door just as they entered the study. Through the slats in the door, I could see them. Denise settling into an armchair while Jesse went to his desk. Did you call the lawyer? She asked. Yes. The papers will be ready to sign on Thursday. Jesse opened his laptop. Once the final transfers are complete, the trust will be fully funded. And Trisha won't be able to touch it? Not a penny. The trust is ironclad. My mother, no, Denise, sighed. I still don't understand why she's so fixated on this. She's never cared about money before. It's not about money for her, Jesse said. It's about belonging. The simple truth of his statement hit me like a physical blow. He understood what I wanted better than she ever had. Well, she doesn't belong, Denise said sharply. She never has. Richard forced me to adopt her, but that doesn't make her mine. Denise. No, I've pretended long enough. I raised her, I provided for her, but I never felt what I feel for my real daughters. Is that so terrible to admit? In the closet, tears streamed down my face. Simon's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing tight. What if she finds out about Catherine? Jesse asked. About the circumstances. She won't. Those records are sealed. And the only other person who knew the truth was Richard. And he's been dead for 15 years. Jesse looked unconvinced. Secrets have a way of surfacing. Then we'll deal with it. Denise stood. I'm going to lie down. This whole situation has given me a migraine. After they left, Simon and I waited 5 agonizing minutes before slipping out of the closet. Trisha, he started. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. My entire identity had just been shattered. I wasn't who I thought I was. And somewhere in their conversation was another secret. Something about the circumstances of my birth mother's death. We need to find out who Catherine Winters was, I said, as we crept toward the side door, and what really happened to her. The mission had changed. This wasn't just about money or revenge anymore. It was about finding the truth of who I really was. 3 days of obsessive research had yielded little about Catherine Winters. No social media footprint, no public records beyond her death certificate. It was as if she'd barely existed. I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, surrounded by printouts and notes, when my phone rang. Sawyer Lawson. My stomach tightened. Sawyer and I had a complicated history. We'd started as rivals at the same marketing firm, competing for the same accounts, the same promotions. Then last year, during the Westbrook campaign, something shifted. We'd been forced to collaborate, and I'd discovered he wasn't the enemy I'd imagined. He was brilliant, driven, and unexpectedly kind when my father's death anniversary hit me harder than usual. We'd almost become something more until I'd pulled away, unable to handle another person who might eventually find me wanting. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Sawyer, I answered, trying to sound normal. This is unexpected. Trisha. His voice was warm, familiar. I heard about your mother, hospital stay, right? Everything okay? I almost laughed at the absurdity. Nothing was okay. She's fine. Just low blood pressure. Good, that's good. He paused. Listen, I'm calling because I saw something strange. Probably nothing. But it had your name on it. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? I was at Meridian Bank yesterday, meeting with a client. While I was waiting, I overheard someone at the next desk, a woman arguing about access to safety deposit boxes. She mentioned your name specifically. Who was she? No idea. Mid-30s, expensive clothes, very entitled attitude. Natalia, had to be. What exactly did she say about me? Something like, we need to secure those items before Trisha finds out they exist. The banker kept telling her they couldn't change access protocols without proper documentation. My mind raced. More hidden assets? Or something about Catherine? Sawyer, I need a favor, a big one. Name it. Can you meet me? Tonight? I need to show you something. 2 hours later, we sat at my kitchen table, the safe documents spread between us. I'd told him everything. The will, the recordings, the safe, Catherine Winters. Sawyer studied the trust agreement, his expression grave. This is a lot. I know it sounds crazy, like I'm paranoid or vindictive. Actually, it sounds like you've been systematically excluded from your family and are trying to understand why. He looked up. Finding out you're adopted would shake anyone. His validation nearly undid me. I blinked back tears. The bank boxes Natalia was trying to access, I said, refocusing. They must contain something important, something they don't want you to find. Sawyer tapped the adoption papers. Maybe more information about your birth mother. That's what I'm thinking. But how do I access them? I don't even know which branch they're at. Sawyer hesitated. I might be able to help with that. My client is a senior VP at Meridian. I could ask some discreet questions. You'd do that? Of course. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Trisha, you deserve to know the truth. The simple kindness broke something in me. I'd been running on anger and adrenaline for days, holding myself together through sheer force of will. Now, with one gentle touch, the dam cracked. What if the truth is worse? I whispered. What if I find out something terrible? Then you'll deal with it. You're the strongest person I know. I shook my head. I'm not. I'm falling apart. No, you're standing up for yourself, maybe for the first time. His eyes held mine. That takes real courage. My phone buzzed. A text from Michaela. Emergency family meeting tomorrow night. Mom says attendance mandatory. Something about the will. I showed Sawyer the message. They're accelerating their timeline, he said. The question is why. They must suspect I know something. I stood, pacing. I need more time. I need to find out about Catherine before confronting them. Maybe this meeting is your opportunity. Get them all together, record everything. And say what? Hey, I broke into your safe and know I'm adopted. No, just listen. See what they reveal. People who are hiding things often say more than they intend to. He was right. This meeting could be my chance to gather final evidence before making my move. I'll need a better recording device, I said. One that can capture everything, even if I'm not directly involved in the conversation. Sawyer nodded. I know someone who can help with that. As he made a call, I stared at the adoption papers. Catherine Winters, my real mother, dead the day I was born. Sawyer, I said when he finished his call, there's something else bothering me. Something Jesse said about the circumstances of Catherine's death. What if it wasn't natural causes? You think there was foul play? I don't know, but Denise said my father was the only other person who knew the truth. That sounds ominous. Sawyer considered this. Your father, your adoptive father, when did he die? 15 years ago. Car accident. And he never told you about Catherine. Never. He and I were close, but I trailed off, a memory surfacing. Wait, the summer before he died, he tried to talk to me about something important, said there was something I should know when I turned 21. But then the accident happened, and Denise never mentioned it. No. A chill ran through me. What if he was going to tell me about Catherine? What if Denise made sure he couldn't? The moment I said it aloud, I knew how paranoid it sounded. God, listen to me. I'm spinning conspiracy theories now. Sawyer didn't laugh. It's not that far-fetched. There's clearly something they're desperate to hide. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from an unknown number. I know who you're looking for. Catherine Winters was my friend. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Riverside Park bench near the old boathouse. Come alone. I showed Sawyer, my hand trembling. It could be a trap, he warned. Or it could be the answers I need. I took a deep breath. I have to go. Not alone. His expression was determined. I'll be nearby, just in case. As he left that night, Sawyer paused at the door. Whatever you find out tomorrow, remember something. Family isn't just blood. It's who stands by you when it matters. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. Tomorrow I would meet someone who knew my birth mother. Tomorrow night, I would face my adoptive family with whatever truths I'd uncovered. One way or another, everything was about to change. Riverside Park was quiet at 9:45 a.m., the morning mist still clinging to the grass. I spotted the bench near the old boathouse and sat, my hands cold, despite the warm June air. Sawyer was positioned at a cafe across the street, watching. His presence was the only thing keeping my nerves in check. At precisely 10 a.m., a woman approached, silver-haired, elegant, probably in her 60s. She carried a worn leather portfolio and studied me with intense blue eyes. "Tricia Stewart?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Margaret Winters. Catherine was my sister. My aunt. I had an aunt." She sat beside me, her movements careful, deliberate. "I've been watching you for years, you know, from a distance. I promised myself I wouldn't interfere unless absolutely necessary." "Why now?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Because you're looking for answers, and because I received a disturbing call from a lawyer asking about Catherine's medical records." She opened her portfolio. "Your mother, your adoptive mother, is trying to destroy evidence." "Evidence of what?" Margaret handed me a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local doctor dies in childbirth. Questions raised about care." "Catherine didn't just die," Margaret said quietly. "She was neglected, left to hemorrhage, while the doctor on call was nowhere to be found." I scanned the article. The doctor's name jumped out at me. Dr. Richard Stewart, my father. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. Your father was having an affair with my sister. When she got pregnant, he panicked. His wife, Denise, had just suffered her second miscarriage. He convinced Catherine to keep the pregnancy secret, promised he'd leave Denise after the baby was born." The world tilted beneath me. "He was my biological father too?" Margaret nodded. "When Catherine went into labor, Richard was the doctor on call, but there were complications. Instead of calling for help immediately, he hesitated, tried to handle it himself. By the time the emergency team arrived, Catherine had lost too much blood. He let her die." The words felt like glass in my throat. The hospital investigation was inconclusive. Richard claimed he'd called for help earlier, that there had been a miscommunication. But the nurse's statements, she shook her head. Denise used her family connections to make it go away. The case was closed. Richard kept his license, and they adopted you. As what? A consolation prize? A reminder of his guilt? I don't know what was in their hearts. I only know they took you, and I was prevented from contesting the adoption. Denise's family had influence. I was young, single, deemed unsuitable. I stared at the article, my entire history rewriting itself. "Why didn't you find me later, when I was grown?" "I tried once. When you were about 20, I sent a letter to your father, asking to meet you. A week later, he died in that accident." Her eyes met mine. "I can't prove it wasn't really an accident. But the timing, you think Denise I couldn't finish the thought. I think she would do anything to protect her reputation, her perfect life. Margaret handed me a thick envelope. These are Catherine's journals, photos, medical records, everything I have of her. You should have them. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Thank you. There's one more thing. She pulled out a small box. Catherine wanted you to have this. It was her mother's. Our mother's. Inside was a delicate silver locket. I opened it to find a tiny photo of a young woman with my eyes, my smile. She loved you, Margaret said softly. She chose your name, Tricia, after our grandmother Patricia. Tears blurred my vision. I'd spent my life feeling unwanted, when all along, my first mother had loved me enough to name me, to leave me her most precious possession. The family meeting tonight, I said. I'm going to confront them with all of this. Margaret's expression darkened. Be careful. Denise has spent 34 years burying this secret. She won't let it come to light easily. I'm not afraid of her anymore. As Margaret left, I clutched the locket, feeling a connection to Catherine, to my true origins, for the first time. The grandfather clock in my mother's foyer struck 7 as I arrived for the family meeting. I wore the locket beneath my blouse, Catherine's journals, and Margaret's evidence secure in my bag. The recording device Sawyer had procured was discreetly pinned inside my jacket. Everyone was already gathered in the living room. Denise at the center, Jessie beside her. My sisters arranged around them like satellites. Their conversations stopped when I entered. Tricia, Denise said, surprise evident in her voice. You came. You said it was mandatory. I took the only empty seat, directly across from her. Something about the will? Yes. She exchanged glances with Jessie. We've made some adjustments that we wanted to discuss as a family. Adjustments, I repeated, like removing me entirely. A tense silence fell. Natalia shifted uncomfortably. Michelle looked confused. Only Michaela met my eyes with understanding. I see Natalia has been talking, Denise said coldly. Actually, I read the letter you gave me. Remember, at the family celebration, I leaned forward. But that's not all I know. Tricia, perhaps we should discuss this privately, Jessie began. No more secrets. I pulled out the trust documents, copies I'd made from the safe. I know about Westlake Properties, the offshore accounts, the trust that excludes me because I'm not a biological descendant. Gasps from Michelle and Michaela. Natalia went pale. You broke into our safe? Jessie's voice rose in outrage. I needed the truth, and now I have it. I turned to my sisters. Did you know that I'm adopted? That our father had an affair? That my biological mother died giving birth to me? That's enough. Denise stood, her face contorted with anger. You have no right. I have every right. I matched her, standing to face her. Catherine Winters was my mother. She died because Dad delayed getting her help, and you covered it up. You don't know what you're talking about, Denise hissed. I met Margaret today, Catherine's sister, my aunt. I pulled out the newspaper clipping. She gave me this, and Catherine's journals, and the medical records you've been trying to destroy. The color drained from Denise's face. You've been speaking with that woman. She told me everything. How you used your family's influence to close the investigation. How you threatened her to stay away. How Dad was going to tell me the truth before he died. Before his accident, Jessie corrected automatically. Was it an accident? I challenged. Or was it like Catherine's death, a convenient tragedy that protected your secrets? Denise slapped me. The crack echoed through the suddenly silent room. I didn't flinch. Hit me all you want. It doesn't change the truth. You want the truth? Denise's voice shook with rage. The truth is, your precious Catherine was a homewrecker who seduced my husband. The truth is your father made a mistake trying to deliver you himself. A mistake that cost her life. And yes, I covered it up. I adopted you. I gave you my name, my home, everything. Except your love, I said quietly. That was only for your real daughters. You were a constant reminder of his betrayal. How could I love that? Her words hung in the air, brutal in their honesty. I unclasped the locket, holding it up. Catherine loved me. She named me. She wanted me. My voice broke. All I ever wanted from you was the same, to be wanted. For the first time, I saw something like shame cross Denise's face. Play the recordings, I said to the room at large. All of them. Let everyone hear what you really think of me, what you've been hiding. I pressed play on my phone. Denise's voice filled the room. She's never really been part of this family, not since she was born. Then Jessie. Once the final transfers are complete, the trust will be fully funded. Denise again. I raised her, I provided for her, but I never felt what I feel for my real daughters. With each damning statement, my sister's expressions changed. Shock, confusion, betrayal. Even Natalia looked shaken. When the recordings finished, the silence was absolute. You recorded us? Jessie finally said. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. One-party consent state. I looked at each of them in turn. I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I just wanted the truth. And now everyone has it. I gathered my things, the weight of 34 years of rejection, finally lifting from my shoulders. I'm Catherine Winter's daughter, I said, my voice steady, and I'm done trying to be yours. As I walked toward the door, Michaela stood. Trisha, wait. I paused, turning back. I'm coming with you, she said. The beach house windows rattled against the evening wind. I sat on the worn deck, watching waves crash against the shore. Catherine's journals spread around me. I'd been reading them for hours, absorbing her words, her hopes, her love for the baby she'd never hold. The sliding door opened behind me. Michaela stepped out, 2 mugs of tea in hand. Thought you might need this, she said, settling beside me. It's getting cold. I accepted the mug gratefully. 3 days had passed since we'd walked out of Denise's house together. 3 days of phone calls ignored, messages deleted, and piecing together the truth from Catherine's writings. Find anything new? Michaela asked. She was an artist, I said, showing her a sketch tucked between journal pages, a self-portrait of Catherine, her pregnant belly rendered in loving detail. She painted landscapes, portraits. She was saving for a gallery space when she met Dad. Michaela studied the drawing. You have her eyes and her talent. I can barely draw a stick figure. I meant her talent for seeing people clearly. She bumped my shoulder gently. For standing your ground when it matters. My phone buzzed again. Natalia, for the 5th time today. I silenced it. You should talk to her eventually, Michaela said. She's been texting me too. What does she want? To apologize, I think. She says she didn't know about Catherine, about how Mom treated you. I believe her. I wasn't ready to forgive Natalia, her years of smug superiority, but I nodded anyway. Maybe someday. The truth was, I felt strangely empty. The vindication I'd expected. The satisfaction of finally exposing everything. It hadn't materialized. Instead, I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of the anger that had defined me for so long. Margaret called, I said. She's coming tomorrow, wants to show me photos, tell me more about Catherine. That's good, right? It is. It's just, I struggled to articulate the feeling. I spent my whole life wanting to belong to that family. Now I know I never did, never could. And I should feel liberated, but instead I feel lost. Michaela finished for me. Like you're floating without an anchor. I looked at her, surprised by her perception. What? She said. I'm not just the baby of the family, you know. I notice things. I'm starting to realize that. I sipped my tea. Why did you come with me? You had everything to lose. Michaela was quiet for a moment. Remember when I was 16? And Mom caught me smoking with those kids from Westlake? Everyone thought I'd get grounded for months. I nodded, unsure where this was going. You were the one who stood up for me, said it was normal teenage rebellion, that punishing me would only make it worse. She smiled at the memory. You were the only one who ever saw me as a person, not just the baby to be protected. That meant something. Her words warmed something in me. All those years feeling like an outsider, and I'd still managed to be there for her, in ways that mattered. A car pulled into the driveway, Simon's ancient Volvo. He and Sawyer had been taking turns checking on us, bringing groceries, helping me sort through the practical aftermath of upending my life. "I'll give you two some privacy," Michaela said with a knowing smile, heading inside. But it wasn't Simon who climbed the deck stairs. It was Denise. I stiffened, instinctively gathering Catherine's journals protectively. "Before you ask me to leave," she said, her voice lacking its usual authority, "please just give me 5 minutes." I said nothing, but didn't move to go inside. She took it as permission and sat in the chair Michaela had vacated, her back rigid. "I've spent 3 days thinking about what to say to you," she began, rehearsing explanations, justifications, but there aren't any, not really. The wind whipped her perfectly styled hair, making her look older, more vulnerable. "When Richard brought you home, I was still grieving my miscarriage. He told me adopting you was the right thing to do, that you needed a mother." Her hands twisted in her lap. "But every time I looked at you, I saw his betrayal, his lies." "That wasn't my fault," I said quietly. "No, it wasn't." For the first time in my memory, her eyes filled with tears. "I told myself I was doing my best, that providing for you materially was enough, but it wasn't. And I knew it wasn't." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. "I found this in Richard's things after he died. I should have given it to you then." Inside was a silver charm bracelet with a single charm, a tiny paintbrush. "It was Catherine's," Denise said. "Richard kept it, along with this." She handed me a folded note. My father's handwriting was instantly recognizable. "For Trisha on her 21st birthday. The truth about your mother: she was extraordinary, an artist who saw beauty everywhere. She wanted you more than anything in this world. Her last words were your name." I couldn't breathe. "You kept this from me for 15 years. Yes, no excuses, no deflection, just admission. Why are you giving it to me now?" "Because you deserve the truth, all of it." She looked out at the ocean. "And because Michaela hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. She says she won't until I make this right." A surprised laugh escaped me. "She's tougher than any of us realized." "She's like you in that way." Denise's gaze returned to me. "I don't expect forgiveness, Trisha, but I want you to know that I was wrong. About everything. The money, the will, it's all been corrected. Your share is waiting whenever you're ready." "I don't want your money." "I know, but it's yours by right." She stood to leave. "Catherine would be proud of the woman you've become. And Richard," her voice caught, "Richard loved you. Whatever his failings, he loved you completely." As she turned to go, I found myself speaking. "Did you have anything to do with his accident?" She froze. "No, that was truly an accident. I may have been cold, Trisha, but I'm not a murderer." I believed her. The realization surprised me. "One more thing," she said at the steps. "Jesse is being investigated for financial improprieties. The adjustments to the will, the offshore accounts. It wasn't just about keeping you out. He was hiding money from federal regulators." "And you didn't know?" "I suspected. But I chose not to see it, just like I chose not to see so many things." She looked back at me one last time. "Goodbye, Trisha." I watched her drive away, the bracelet cool in my palm. I didn't feel triumph or vindication, just a quiet certainty that a chapter had closed. Inside, I found Michaela in the kitchen, with Simon and Sawyer, laughing over takeout containers. "Everything okay?" Simon asked, noting my expression. "Getting there," I said, taking a seat among them. Later, after dinner, I walked alone to the shoreline. I fastened Catherine's locket around my neck, then added the charm bracelet to my wrist. The tiny paintbrush caught the moonlight. I thought about Catherine, her artist's eye seeing beauty where others missed it. About Margaret, who had watched over me from afar all these years. About Michaela, brave enough to choose right over loyalty. About Simon and Sawyer, who had stood by me without question. Family, not defined by blood or names or legal documents, but by choice, by love freely given. I opened the locket, looking at Catherine's face in the dim light. "I found my way," I whispered to her. "Not to who they wanted me to be, but to who I am." The waves rushed in, erasing my footprints in the sand. But I wasn't disappearing. For the first time in my life, I was fully, completely visible, to myself and to those who truly mattered. I closed the locket and walked back toward the beach house, where light spilled from the windows and voices called my name.